First mistake that people are doing is relying too much on their feet. This is 2077, you don't need to walk to places anymore, and even more so relying on the dumb AI car that more often than not likes driving over you instead of stopping where it needs to stop. So if you don't want to be a peasant even in the future and want to get a better means of transportation, you will use this method right here that is much faster than most of the cars in the game and way more convenient than anything else 2077 has in store for you. So here is what you need to make all of this work. There's only two mods. One of them is the KhrazeGaming, which gives you access to a slow motion if you aim while dodging. The second one is going to be the reinforced tendons for the double jump feature. So here is how you would use this under normal circumstances, as in you would run towards the enemy, press dodge to slide, then aim your weapon, and this would slow down the time in order to take down the target way easier. But for this type of movement we will do the exact opposite of that, which is aiming first and only then double pressing the dodge button to enter that slow motion state. So again, we're gonna aim, we're gonna double press dodge, and this is gonna immediately put us into that slow motion state. But from this point on, there's only one step forward, or should I say a couple of steps, since we're gonna be able to do two more movements before the slow motion runs out. And that is, you can dodge two more times if you also let go of the button midway through the slow motion phase. So let me demonstrate. We're gonna start with the aim, we're gonna press double dodge, this is gonna enter the slow motion. We're gonna immediately let go of the aim button and then double press dodge two more times, as in one dodge and then another dodge like half a second soon after that. If you do this properly, you will even feel the controller vibrating up to 3 times for each of the dodges that you're doing. The final part is where the double jump comes into play, and that is, well, after the third and final dodge you can add the jump, which is gonna give you a massive speed increase, and you're gonna be able to just continuously bunny hop your way with really high speed, way faster than any vehicle in the game. And you can even combine it with another movement like these, like midway through, to progressively increase your speed even more and like go way faster than the game can even load. Like, this is how fast you can get in Cyberpunk using this same method. This also brings us to the second reason and the second mistake for not using the double jump feature, and that is the fact that it gives you unparalleled access to every part of the game, be it horizontally or vertically. So this is especially useful when you're trying to get from one point to another really fast and you kind of have to do a detour because there might be a big building or a high bridge or something that kind of stays in your way. Well, you can use both the double jump and even more so the previous method to actually close any gap in the game, even if it might be on a different building. Like, let's say for example you might want to go onto the rooftop of a building so that you can reach the other side way faster because there is a waypoint over there that you want to reach. Well, you can totally do that. You can use your double jump to first of all reach that point of the building, and then use the previous method that gave you that speed to actually jump and close the gap between the two rooftops. And well, the examples can be numerous and almost infinite because there's a ton of circumstances where you can use these two abilities right here to kind of reach any point you want to in the game. The third big trap that I'm seeing a ton of people falling into is wasting precious resources on mods that don't even stack with one another, especially when it comes to the more expensive legendary ones like the Deadeye, the Bully mod, and Fortuna. So let me give you an example right here. Now we have 116% critical damage right here without any mods that increase that. We only have it from, for example, the point investment into attributes. So let's go ahead and add a Bully mod that adds another 30% critical damage on top of that. If we were to go back into the UI and check our stats, now we have 146 from that 116, so that 30% Bully mod increase did work. Now if you were to add a second Bully mod, even the UI kind of gives us an indication that we might get a plus 60% crit damage, right? Well, you would be wrong on that one because, well, guess what? The critical damage stays the same as if it was with only one of these mods. It also doesn't even matter if you spread it on the same piece of clothing or on different pieces of clothing, they will only count once on your gear, so make use of it only once. Now, of course, you can stack different mods with one another. Like, for example, you can totally put a Bully and a Fortuna, and both of them will work at the same time. Again, just the restriction to one on your entire gear. The only one that doesn't work at all right here is gonna be the Deadeye, which is unfortunately in the current version 1.05 it doesn't seem to work at all. But yeah, once it does, it is going to be the better version of it, since it gives you both critical chance and critical damage with one single mod. Now, this only seems to be the case with these 3 legendary mods, because everything else in the game can definitely stack, both for the clothing and especially so for the weapons. Which brings us to the 4th big recommendation and big mistake that you might have done in the past, which is not stacking armor on all of your clothing pieces, especially the one called the Armadillo. So I've covered how to find this and craft epic versions of these in one of the previous videos, but definitely go ahead and don't do the mistake of not carrying at least a few of these for each piece of clothing that you have. That is why it's recommended to get item pieces that have as many modding slots as possible, since this is going to give you access to more Armadillo mods and a way bigger increase in armor for your character. For example, if you were to go on the very high difficulty with over 5,000 armor, you're literally going to be immortal right there, because you're going to block about 95% of all incoming damage that comes from bullets and, of course, from melee attacks. And the same goes with the damage mods on weapons, by the way. You can totally stack these with one another, like especially the crunch mode. Go ahead and do so, because just a few of these can increase your damage by up to 30% on the same weapon without having anything else equipped on it. This brings us to the 5th big mistake, and that is the fact that upgrading items is a complete waste of time and resources right now in the game, at least in its current state. Let's take the example with these 2 shirts right here. One of them has been acquired at a pretty low level, so it only comes with about 81 armor. Meanwhile, that one that has been acquired more recently has about 199, so that is a pretty huge difference. Now, what would happen if I were to go ahead and bring the low level one to the maximum level and get it closer to that 199 armor mark? Well, that would be extremely expensive, to the point that like the last 10 levels of upgrade would cost like hundreds of resources each for even the more rare ones. So this will literally mean that for one single item to bring it from the lowest level to the highest level, you would need to spend thousands of each of the resources every single time, which is a complete waste. Unless you have done something in the past to dupe your items and want to kind of get rid of them so that your save file doesn't become corrupted, yes, you can definitely go ahead and do so. You can bump any low level item to the current level 50 item quality. You can definitely do that, but otherwise it's a complete waste of resources, which is why I would suggest to avoid it, at least for the clothing pieces. Now, since we are on the subject of early on mistakes, let's also talk about one that, well, unfortunately I must admit that I kind of did it all the way up until the middle of the game, which was not crafting bullets and regen packs when I totally had the option in my crafting menu with little to no investment at all right from the beginning of the game. So maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't, but you can actually craft any type of bullet in the game for any type of weapon with a single press of a button and barely any resource consumption. And the same goes with the regen packs, by the way. You don't have to craft too many of these, it also doesn't consume too many resources, and you're gonna be able to not rely on enemy drops anymore, and even more so be a knucklehead like me and head over into battle without having any bullets in my weapons. Moving on to number 7, are you sure that you crafted the best possible version of that iconic legendary that you just got? Because chances are you probably didn't, and this brings us to the crafting menu right here that kind of presents you with a ton of options and even more so a ton of information that you might otherwise overlook. Now, if you pay attention to these item cards, they immediately tell you a pretty complete picture, and that is the fact that there is a pretty wild stat range when it comes to these, well, stats that you can get on each of these weapons. This includes everything from damage to critical chance to the bonuses on it to like even the way it functions. All of these will be random every time you craft one of these examples, which is why I would suggest you to avoid the next big mistake on the list, and that is to not rely on the weapon that you just crafted simply because it's the only one you crafted. In fact, you might even want to craft multiple of the same pieces until you get the proper one with the highest stats possible. Let me give an example with this Carnage shotgun right here. There's such a huge difference between just two of these examples that it can go all the way up to 30% additional damage and way better stats on the item card. You might even want to create additional save files and go over the ones that might have higher stats and have something to roll back to in case you can't craft newer ones with better stats. Just my opinion, but again, you're free to do whatever you want to. Moving on to number 8, this is gonna be the last one on the list, and even though this isn't a fully on mistake, it is something that you might think of wrong about the game, and that is the fact that the quality of the drops is not dependent on the difficulty of the game, but rather on your actual level. So even though you might increase that difficulty to very high, it's probably not going to guarantee better items across the board, at least not from my testing. It does increase things like enemies HP, enemies damage onto you, and even the XP that you get slightly from these enemies, but otherwise the quality of the item is going to be dependent on the level of your actual character. This is why in the beginning of the game you kept getting like whites and greens and maybe occasionally a blue one, and then later on at 35 plus or 40 plus and even more so 50, you would constantly get epics almost all the time, and even more so legendaries. And by the way, do keep in mind that this only affects the random drops and not the specific drops, like for example a certain piece of gear that drops from a specific boss or from a specific encounter. These are completely different and they will almost always stay the same in terms of the quality. But anyway, this is it with the biggest mistakes. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.